Yesterday we learned about the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that he argues on the rabbis. He says that the karbanos of Yom Tov, the karbanos of Yom Tov, Purim, there's a difference between which ones. The Purim, the bulls, they are ein ma'akvin zeh. They're not ma'akiv each other. But the other karbanos are ma'akiv each other. The other karbanos, the elim, the kvasim, they are dependent one on the other. So Purim are not, but the others are. What is his source? He says, well, the Purim are the and it gets less and less. And because of that, because it's mesmaid v'hoila, so therefore the fact that they're not the same number means that they're not really dependent on each other. It doesn't. The amount is not it's if you don't have the full amount, it's also fine. Part of are not ma'akev zeh. And the rabbis argued. They said, "What do you mean? The Shmini Atzeres, everything gets less. All the other karbanis as well. So you see, even the other karbanis are mismayet. They get less. Therefore, those other karbanos should also be not ma'akiv zeh. They should be dependent one on another. And the source is because Shmini Atzeres. So what's Rabbi Yehuda's answer? That Shmini Atzeres is not part of the equation. Shmini Atzeres is a regel b'fnei atzma. And what does this boil down to? What it boils down to is that do you say a shehachiyanu on Shmini Atzeres or not? Is it a regel b'fnei atzma? Is it a holiday of its own right or not? And this is what Rabbi Yochanan had said. There's some very revolutionary statement that on there's a difference between Shmini Pesach and the Shmini Atzeres. That the holiday at the end of Pesach, the last day of Pesach, and the holiday at the end of Sukkah are different. Shmini Atzeres is the regel b'fnei atzma. Now, the Gemara had brought a number of different explanations to this. Number one, Shmini Atzeres is different in Sukkah. You don't dwell in the Sukkah. Shmini Atzeres, shake lulav. The third thing was the Nisoch Hamayim. Nisoch Hamayim. Then the Gemara said that another idea that the Gemara had mentioned other points. For example, the fact that the number of bulls are much less. It's Shmini Atzeres. It doesn't continue to be. It looks like it's something different. It doesn't continue the numbers. And then we had the fact that it's u'bayoyim by all the other days of Sukkot. It has a vav there, and when it talks about the eighth day, it doesn't say u'bayoyim, the extra vav. And again, proving that it's a regel b'fnei atzma, a holiday of its own right. You should say shachiyanu. And then we even had the fact that it says kamishpatam right before it on the seventh day. It mentions kamishpatam, which gives the implication that the the other days of Sukkot are sort of are connected, and the Shmini Atzeres is disconnected because it just says Kamishpad. It doesn't say like the others, implying like it's a different holiday. Okay, so those were all the different reasons. And then the Gemara said, but now we wanted to say that we have a little proof from this whole discussion about Haram Elam and Kvasim, that Rabbi Yehuda says that they are, that Rabbi Yehuda says that Shemini is a regal b'fnei atzmahu, and he answers the rabbis. And I mentioned yesterday that it is a little interesting that the Gemara brings this as a proof, or tried to bring it as a proof, because what about the rabbi's opinion? No, you bring it as a proof, but what's the proof? It's Rabbi Yehuda's. It's one view. It sounds like maybe the rabbis might argue on Rabbi Yehuda. And so we answered yesterday that one of the commentaries deals with this question and says the fact that the rabbis don't answer back, it sounds like they ultimately they acknowledge Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning. In other words, they understand, they agree, so to speak, with the logic of Rabbi Yehuda that because they didn't answer him back about the other animal, that they understand his logic, that it makes sense that this is a regal b'fnei, because this is a regal b'fnei, therefore it would be, you could see that the parim are considered the parim on Sukkot are not dependent on each other, versus the other korbanos are dependent on each other, and you can't take Shmini Atzeres into consideration because that's a regal b'fnei atzma. Okay, so anyway, that's the that was the pretty much the Gemara on page 47a, and what it really connects to is, if we look in this week's parsha, really, you have this idea that it mentions on the korbanos. What do you do if you don't have all the korbanos? This week's parsha, we had it says v'hikravtem isha l'Hashem on korban Pesach. It says over there they should bring a fire offering to Hashem. Shivas yamim v'yom hashmim kodesh. So what does it mean v'hikravtem isha l'Hashem? 7 days, bring up fire offering for Hashem. So Rashi says, if you don't have that, this first of all, this is talking about the Musafim, and why does it say it over here? The Musaf is normally in Parshas Pitifus. Why does it say it over here? Rashi says to teach you they're not ma'akiv each other. They're not dependent one on another one. Bring the carbon. You don't have parim, bring elam. You don't have the elam, you bring the kvasim. No, the korbanos are not dependent on each other. That's by Pesach. And we here, our Gemara is mentioning that on Sukkot there's room to say that either all the korbanos are ma'akiv each other, that is the rabbis, and Rabbi Yehuda said the parim are not ma'akiv each other, similar to Pesach. They're not dependent on each other, because and his reason is they're masmait v'hoylech. They're not exactly the same number every day. It keeps the numbers change. Now, so we see that. So we see from the fact that the rabbis didn't argue, it would seem like you have a little proof that that Shmini is a regal b'fnei atzma. It deserves a shehachiyanu. Now, and what's the wording of Rabbi Yehuda? He says, "Kashem sheshivas yimei chag tu'unim karban v'shir bracha b'lina." The same way the 7 days of Sukkot need karban, shir, bracha, and lina. These, so also Shmini Atzeres, it's a regal b'fnei atzma. It needs these things: karban, shir, bracha, lina. What are these things? So the thing that the way Rabbi Yehuda concludes his statement is that it needs a special carbon, different, and so in other words, one second. So in the same way, the 7 days need a carbon. So also Shmini Atzeres needs like its own seder of a carbon. It has to have its own type of a carbon. It's not going to continue in the same number as the carbonis of Sukkot. The same thing is it needs to have its own shear, its own song that the Levium sing. It has to have its own bracha, which we'll soon see what it means, and it has to have lina. You have to stay overnight. So basically, so Shmini Atzeres would be the same thing. And so the fact that the Gemara says it's a regel b'fnei atzmai, that itself doesn't mean that it gets a shachianu bracha yet. It's still like somewhere, it's a regel b'fnei atzmai. Okay, he says clearly it's a regel b'fnei atzmai, but to what extent? So he sort of explains that it's regarding these four things, regel b'fnei atzmai. So does that make it enough to get a shachianu? And so here is where really, and when you turn the page, that's really what with the Gemara is like dealing with that. Okay, it's a regel b'fnei atzmai, but to what extent? And here the Gemara says it's a regel b'fnei atzmai regarding zman. When it says whether it's bracha, it means zman. That one of the four things is a bracha. So it means that it does get its own shachianu. That to that extent, it's a bracha b'fnei. It's a regel b'fnei atzmai. Gemara then goes through, and this was a little back and forth, like constantly questioning if we can really prove these things, if that's a good proof. The Gemara brings a proof. It says Hachanam Mistabra. It sounds like this is correct because you wouldn't have a shachianu all 7 days, so must be. So the Gemara says. First of all, you can't prove this is not a proof because Zman refers to in the Shemona Esrei. You have Zman, you have Shmini Atzeres HaChag that you don't say Chag HaSukkah says that you say Shmini Atzeres HaChag. So this would make sense that it doesn't mean Shachianu. It could mean that it takes on its own term, its own title. It gets its own title. That's what it refers to. And the Gemara tries to say that maybe it's mistaber to say this way. It makes sense because Zman doesn't really fit because it talks about all 7 days of Sukkot get their own bracha, and you don't say Shachianu all 7 days. So it would make sense that if it means all 7 days get their own bracha means that they own their own title. That is true because in the benching and in the davening they get their own title. It gets a title called Chag HaSukkah says that. And therefore, Shmini Atzeres should also get its own title. Shmini Atzeres HaChag Shmini Chag Atzeres HaZeh. So what is the brisa mean if it says that you say bracha would mean shachianu? Well, you'd say it 7 times, 7 days. That l'chayra can't be the pshat. So it has to be. That is referring to the title in the benching and in the davening. Gemara says that's not really a kasha because you could say it means if you don't do shechianu one day, you could still do it another day. So that's maybe what it would mean. So what the Gemara just disproved is that it's not definite that you have to say it means berachas hamazon and tefillah, but it could mean that. But it doesn't have to mean that. It could still mean shachianu. It might mean shachianu. And if it would mean shachianu, this would fit with Rabbi Yehuda, with the way our Gemara with Rabbi Yochanan, excuse me. This would fit with what Rabbi Yochanan had said. Now, the Gemara says that you still would need a kais if you're doing, and if you're going to tell me that the shachianu you could recite any of the other days, it does sound a little strange. You would still need a kais, and how would you be able to say shachianu? How could you translate Shachianu to mean that you could say it any day. The other days of Sukkah, you don't have a kais. So, of course, this is an interesting question that the Gemara. I know it's a little surprising that the Gemara would ask such a question because, okay, you don't have a kais. Some people don't have wine on the other days. Okay, you don't have any wine left. If you miss the bracha Shachianu and you need to say a Shachianu bracha now, so you'll figure out how to get yourself a cup of wine, and you can say Shachianu. If you have wine, you'll say the Shachianu, not the, that's all the Bryce is saying. So what type of a kasha really is it? Oh, you don't have wine. And so, of course, you understand the Gemara to mean, well, maybe in those days people were poor, they probably didn't have wine, they didn't have any, it was there's always a struggle to get, to come up with the Shabbos so the Gemara is like on a very surface level. You can say, well, most people maybe didn't have wine during Chol Hamoed. Of course, there's a big topic of discussion in the later commentaries, the halachic poskim. Does that mean that they didn't hold that there was a mitzvah of having wine on Yom Tov and Chol Hamoed? Is there a mitzvah of simcha? And so it is a little talked about this actual wording of the Gemara. That's what do you mean? You don't have a kais. So there's a mitzvah to have simcha on every day of Chol Hamoed. But anyway, the Gemara here says that the kais, you need a kais. The Gemara says, well, maybe you could say that this follows Rab Nachman. Let's say that this is a proof to Rab Nachman that says that you don't really need a kais to say Shachianu, because you could say Shachianu even in the marketplace. You don't need a kais, and so the Gemara says that it's not a problem. We could say that he came up with the kais, like we assumed initially. That the fact is, it could be that a person will have a kais and he'll need a kais if he wants to say Shachianu. Maybe you need a kais. So it's not really a proof to Rav Nachman. It's not a proof that this can't be the meaning. It could be the meaning of the bracha that you have that you have on Sukkot, that it's unique. That each day is going to have this bracha, this special bracha. Could be Shachianu bracha, and if you miss it one day, you say it another day. And then talk about the case where you have a kais. Now the Gemara gets a little more involved because Gemara finds a contradiction here. But I see, Jeffrey, you seem to have a number of things you wanted to share. Say.
Well, we know that you don't need a kos for Shachianu because they suggested when you make the Sukkah, you say Shachianu. When you build the Sukkah. So clearly it was saying Shachianu when it wasn't even Yom Tov, wasn't even Chol Hamoed. So the original idea was delayed so you say all the brachas together in the Sukkah. But originally, the idea...
That's a good question. So what do you think? How do you answer the Gemara to
that? I think that, yes, you could say Shachianu is certainly during Chol Hamoed, and without it being a Yom Tov that's restrictive, because that was the original pattern. But then they sort of put it all together. You'll say Kiddush, and you'll be sitting in the Sukkah, and you'll say all the brachas together. For Shevis Sukkah and Shachianu, you put it all together. That's just to standardize it. It makes it the same as all holidays. So then it's less confusing. But we even make changes that the first day you say the Shachianu one place in the Kiddush, and the second night you say Shachianu in a different place in the Kiddush. I don't know if you have that custom too.
Okay? Yeah.
Sure. Once you do it after.
You know why?
Yes.
You know why that is?
I'm assuming because you already sat in the Sukkah the other day. So you leave that one separate.
Well, sort of. It's the Shachianu is going on the dwelling. It's not just on the holiday, but it's also on the dwelling in the Sukkah. Therefore, you first say the bracha of the dwelling in the Sukkah, and then you say Shachianu on both. But yeah, But anyway, getting back to your first point. So your first point is that it does seem surprising that the Gemara is assuming that you need a kais when we had a Gemara before that said you say shachianu when you build the sukkah, you put it together. You say when you make the lulav, right? So I mean, it wasn't the conclusion in the Gemara. We basically said that we do it all on the kais, but the understanding of the Gemara is that it should be acceptable. So what does the Gemara here mean when it says that at least it has has a question like how could you do shachianu without having a kais? So yeah, that's definitely a strong question. The thing that my guess is that because there are two different shachianus. One shachianu is on building the sukkah, on making the lulav, putting it together. This shachianu is on the holiday. The holiday shachianu, the Gemara understands that this one should be recited with a kais. And that's at least the initial thought. Now, the truth is that I think we had a proof last time that maybe you wouldn't say a second shachianu. Once you say the first shachianu, I think we saw a proof, and I think Thurs brought a proof before that you don't say a second shachianu. It would have been.
Yeah, and Rashi
says and it doesn't say twice, right? Yeah, Thurs just mentioned that, and so in other words, the shachianu must go also on the Yom Tov. That since the sukkah's machmas chag kos yasvaru dizman dida v'tishabech b'choil pater hu af b'chag. Pater is on the chag. So it sounds like if you made the bracha, you made the bracha, but that means that because you can't make the bracha anymore, you can't do it. But l'chatchila, it has to be done on a kais. You get what I'm saying?
We're missing some of the sound.
Like it sounds like maybe the kais is essential. Wait, you can't hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
About two sentences got skipped.
Oh, so let me tell you again. So basically, what I was saying is, I initially answered that the difference between the shachianu maybe that you make for building a sukkah versus the shachianu for the Yom Tov. That the rabbis established shachianu for Yom Tov. It's on a kos. But then I said, but there is a problem with what I just said, because the Thurs before had brought a proof from the Gemara that once you say shachianu on the sukkah, you don't have to say shachianu on the Yom Tov. It sort of exempts it. So if so, it sounds like you don't need a kais even for the holiday shachianu. On that, I answered that no, maybe you could say that because you said a shachianu on the sukkah, and it's also connected to the holiday, so it exempts you to be able to recite another shachianu, even though you didn't do it on a kais, but like in a b'di'evadik way, in a way that was done after the fact, it's already you were yaitzer. But when you're going to recite shachianu properly for Yom Tov, and that's what the whole shachianu is going to be on, then you would need a kais. And that's what the Gemara understands, at least initially, that maybe then, it would be essential for it to have a kais.
And then Rashi says that if you didn't say it the first night, that you certainly could say it in the intermediate days.
That was the Gemara's understanding of how you could reconcile and say that this brisa works with Shachianu bracha. Like, how do you fit it in Shachianu? You don't say 7 Shachianus. So how do you fit it in to this brisa where it says that he says what's the wording there? How do you fit it in where it says that kishem sheshivas yimei hachag tu'unin shir bracha? How could you say? 1 second.
Are you looking back at 46?
No. I'm sorry. I was just trying to mute everyone. But I was on 47, the bottom of 47a. So the wording there was Shivas Yemei Hachag Tu'unin Karban Shir Ubracha. 7 days need a bracha. How could you say that in 7 days? You say Shachiyanu. So the Gemara says it doesn't mean you say Shachiyanu 7 days. It could mean that you say a Shachiyanu any of the 7 days. That's all it means. Any of the 7 days. And on that, the Gemara had a problem. What about you don't have a kais? But the Gemara's conclusion is that doesn't really. That doesn't prove anything. You need a kais. Maybe you need a kais. Maybe you don't need a kais. If you don't, Rav Nachman holds you don't need a kais. You want to say that that's the meaning that we're holding like Rav Nachman. Rav Yehuda holds like Rav Nachman. It proves Rav Nachman's opinion that must be. Not necessarily. It doesn't. It could be that you got yourself a cup during Chol Hamoed and you said a Shachiyanu on it. So it could be that we don't follow Rav Nachman. But the main point is that you could learn either way, but it's not a proof. Initially, we thought this was a proof. Lema Masayeh Alei. This is a proof to Rabbi Yochanan. It's not really a proof because the bracha here might just mean that it gets its own title, but not that it gets its own Shachiyanu. So maybe it's the same as Pesach, that the Shmini Atzeres doesn't get a Shachiyanu. It says here you got a bracha. Bracha means that it has its own title in the Shemona Esrei, in the Brachas Hamazon and in the Shemona Esrei. So then the Gemara. Okay, so Jeffrey, did you want to say something else? So that was one. That was one topic. You're muted. I'm sorry. You have to unmute yourself.
It's curious that the Torah says, sit in the Sukkah 7 days, and then it says, Bayom Hashemini, without saying any other indication that it's different.
Well, I always think about it this way. It skips out of Hav, but it does say it's called the eighth. You don't have an eighth if you don't have 7 before it. So you get both. You got both things right there. You got both sides of the coin. On the one hand, it is a continuation. You can't have an eighth without 7.
Yeah,
so
but it says
sounds like
sit 7 days. So I really don't understand why we're insisting that we sit the 8th day. And the other holidays, we also said Shechiyanu 2 times at the beginning of the holiday, in case it was the wrong day to start. But once you started, you sat 7 days. So it seems to me that should be good. And Shmini is different.
I didn't really follow. So you're saying, so I think the first point was that it does sound like it's a continuation because it's called it Yom HaShmini. I mean, I was saying based on the fact that it called it the 8th day. You're saying based on the fact that it says it right after the 7 days, it continues right into this, which gives a little impression that it's a continuation, not its own holiday. Okay.
Right.
But again, but it also doesn't have. It also gives us a lot of hints that it is its own holiday.
Yes,
the amount of kabbanis and the vav and everything that we've been mentioning here on this page over here. All the hints, the mishpatam, the vav, the all of it gives us this implication that it's that it has its
really
own,
different.
That's different. So it obviously is, but then again, even Rabbi Yehuda, who says it's a regel b'fnei atzmai, he says regarding 4 things. It's like he does tell us regarding these 4 things. He doesn't just say it's completely different. You know, so
Right.
so you see that
But
it sounds like there's like an element of Sukkah still there, to the extent that I must say, you know, one of the big kasha shilas that Rabbanim get asked is what happens when you say the wrong title in Shemini Esrei, you say Chag HaSukkah says that instead of Shemini Atzeres Chag Hazeh. Shemini Chag Atzeres is a big, very, very popular question, and there's a Taz that says that the halacha is it's fine, it's kosher. Shemini Esrei was fine. Why? Because this is called Atzeres. What is Atzeres? It's the end of the earlier
the celebration.
of the earlier celebration, so it's part of Sukkot. So you know, so there is an element of Sukkot. Not everyone agrees with that, but there is a Taz of the. I think the Mishnah Brewer. I think it's brought down. You don't repeat Shemini Esrei based on that Taz because it's such views. I didn't actually look it up now, but I believe there is that there is such a concept that because the Taz holds, you don't have to repeat Shemini Esrei. Like you can't repeat it because there'll be a bracha about Talah, Suffolk bracha. You have to be, you know, you can't say a bracha. But basically, right. So you do see it. It does seem like it has elements of Sukkot to it, and it's called Atzeres. That's the Taz. Yeah, the pasuk says that. And it's called Atzeres, and it could be a halacha that you might not even repeat Shemini. On the other hand, these four things, he says, it's a regal b'fnei atzmai, carbon, shear, bracha, lina. Yeah. So anyway, that's what it seems to be a sort of a hybrid, you know, where it has a little of its own, a little of Sukkot to it, and we just got to figure out, you know, what's the halacha with Zman, with Shechiyah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. So the Gemara then says, it gets into this whole thing. Well, what about the Lina part of it? Lina, the staying overnight, is somewhat of an issue here because we know Rabbi Yehuda holds that Pesach Sheni doesn't need Lina. And he proves it. He has a brisa that he says that Pesach Sheni doesn't need lina. He has psukim to tell you that you don't have to stay overnight. Normally, you're not allowed to leave Yushalayim until you stay overnight after the holiday. And so he proves that it's only a 6-day holiday. And Pesach Sheni is a 1-day holiday. You don't have to, if a person who comes and brings a carbon on Pesach Sheni doesn't have to stay overnight. He can leave right away. That's Rabbi Yehuda's expounding on some psukim. It comes up with that halacha. So the question is, it only applies to a 6-day holiday. It sounds like it would sound like Shemini Atzeres. You want to tell me it's its own holiday, but it's not 6 days. It's not a 6-day holiday. So therefore, how could you obligate Lina? So he says you need Lina. It's sort of like a contradiction. It is. It's a contradiction to Rabbi Yehuda. You say you need Lina for Shemini Atzeres. You need to stay overnight after the holiday of Shemini Atzeres. Shemini Atzeres is a 1-day holiday. You have to stay overnight in Yerushalayim. And on the other hand, he says that holidays that are not 6 days, you don't stay overnight. So this was a contradiction the Gemara asks. And what does the Gemara say? That it only refers to something similar to it. Now, there's only excluding Pesach Sheni, comparing it to Pesach Rishon. Other holidays, if it's a 1-day holiday, you still have an obligation of staying overnight. It's only regarding Pesach. When you talk about both Pesachs, only the Pesach Rishon, the regular Pesach, that's a 6-day holiday, and that needs. But if it's not, so he's not giving a teaching that any holiday that's not 6 days doesn't need. No, regarding the Pesach holiday and things similar, it's only the one that's a 6-day holiday that would need, but not the other one that's similar to it, but it's not a 6-day holiday. That's how the Gemara wants to explain it. The problem is when the Gemara says, it sounds, we have a proof to this because Bikurim, it says needs Lina. And it also says it needs tenufa, needs to be waved. They would wave it in all directions. And so the Gemara's understanding that who holds that you need that bikurim need to be waved. It doesn't say the word waving. It says waving by other places, but it doesn't say clearly about the waving. So who holds that bikurim, the first fruits, and you bring them to the kohen, and you recite that whole paragraph about Rami Yevidavi, that ultimately Hashem gave us the land of Eretz Yisrael, and here are the first fruits. And, so that mitzvah bikurim needs tenufa. It's Rabbi Yehuda holds that it needs tenufa, and so Rabbi Yehuda also holds if Rabbi Yehuda is the author of this Mishnah, because he says he needs tenufa, and the Mishnah says you need tenufa, you need waving. So it makes sense that he's the author of this Mishnah, and the Mishnah itself says that bikurim also you need to stay overnight. Now bikurim is a one-time mitzvah; it's not a 6-day mitzvah. You go bring it and goodbye. You're done. You did it. And yeah, you have to stay overnight. The Mishnah itself says it needs tenufa and it needs lina. It says a few other things, carbon and shear. You have to bring a carbon, shlamim, and you have to do a shear, this song that the Levium would sing. But the point is that you see that Rabbi Yehuda holds there's lina even on 1-day holidays. Bikurim. So the Gemara, the Gemara says it's not really a proof. The Gemara says you could say Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is the source. Maybe it's not Rabbi Yehuda. It's not Rabbi Yehuda, and because we have a source of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov who says that it also bikurim needs tenufa, and he learns from Shlamim, and he learns that you put your hands under the hands of the Bailim. So you basically don't have a proof to this explanation of Rabbi Yehuda that there's a difference between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, but the other holidays they also have lina. We don't clearly have a proof to this differentiation that Rabbi Yehuda holds of it, although it does make sense. It does make sense that we have to say it in order to reconcile Rabbi Yehuda, but we don't have a proof of it, which would have been nice if we had a proof to say that bikurim that we see from bikurim that it is. We don't clearly see that that's Rabbi Yehuda's statement. That might be Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's statement. Okay, so that's where we got up to, and now we're at the bottom of page 47b. 47b. Let's see, where are we? Here, 4 lines up from the bottom. Mai Haviyallah. So the Gemara says, so what's the conclusion? Mai Haviyallah, what's the halacha? Shachiyanu and Shmini Atzeres or not? So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman Amar Mizman Shmini Shachag. You say Shachiyanu. Rav Sheshes Amar Einam Mizman Shmini Shachag. Rav Sheshes says you don't. Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes, famous 2 rabbis that argue with each other. Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes. So the halacha is Zman Shmini. Then the Gemara says we even have a brisa that says, according to Rav Nachman, what does it say? Shmini regal b'fnei atzmai. Shmini, we're on page 48a.